Hey there, Internet friends. Trevor Starkey here with another episode of Trevor Trove Gaming. Today I'm going to talk about my impressions of South Park: The Fractured Butthole. I wrapped up the game early this morning, effectively. I basically stayed up until 4 or 5 in the morning finishing it. And it was a lot of fun. It doesn't quite hit the highs of Stick of Truth for me, in terms of just overall effect of the game, but I think a lot of that stems from we didn't know what to expect with the first one, and I know I'm probably not alone in saying any of this stuff. I think I've seen a lot of this being the general vibe around this game going around. The Stick of Truth just came out of nowhere, really. Nobody was really expecting much, and it wowed everybody. The Fractured Butthole, still, same great South Park sense of humor. If you enjoy the South Park sense of humor, it is very kind of in your face. They are a little I think, too on the nose at some points in some of their satire and the topics they go after, but it's a lot of fun. There's definitely a lot of oh my god, of course they're doing that kind of stuff, which in other games would be, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. But I will say that I think Fractured Butthole does a good job kind of building on what the Stick of Truth started. They didn't just kind of rest on their laurels and make that game again. They really did try and build upon it. So it's not the combat is a little bit more difficult and a little bit more in depth, and there is kind of now a dimension of movement into combat. You have to kind of manage your placement. There is kind of a grid system, and so your moves will only really do damage in certain spaces, and it's a great idea, but I think it kind of loses a little bit of action in that so much of these moves are still designed based around the very 2D nature of South Park, and so much of it is still kind of on the same plane, and there isn't a lot in the way of attacks that go up or down. There are a few, but so much of kind of the core attacks really attack in a very linear pattern on that left to right axis instead of up and down. The other place I think this game really delves into that the first one didn't necessarily is with your party members and your other characters. So of course you had in Stick of Truth, you had all of your characters playing fantasy kind of world. So you had your elves and your wizards and stuff like that. And here, of course, we're playing with the superhero genre. So the kids right at the beginning of the game kind of wrap up playing fantasy and turn into superheroes, and that's kind of the genre that they jump into. And so each of the kids has their very distinct superhero alter ego. You have Stan as Toolshed, and Butters, of course, is Professor Chaos, and Kyle is Human Kite. And so every character has their superhero alter ego. Some very much established in the show, if you're familiar with kind of those episodes in the show. And I think that's where they put the focus in this game. So there are a lot of great character moments and just great character lines in so much of the story of the game ends up being told in the combat. And that's kind of really how they play with the combat and make it kind of continue to be engaging, is they do have the characters talking to each other in between the lines, and there are a lot of great moments there. And kind of the trade-off of those great character moments is that there aren't as many iconic story moments as we had in Stick of Truth. I think part of that is also the world feels so much bigger in this one, and it's not. It's still South Park. If you played Stick of Truth, kind of the map is built on 3 tiers. You've got the front tiers, the row of houses, then you've got the main street, and then you've got the bigger businesses in the back, kind of in the hierarchy of things. But the houses all have, I think, more to explore a little bit here. There are 2 to 3 rooms, maybe 4 even in some cases, in each house that you can kind of explore. And I will say, don't do what I did and investigate every place as soon as it opens up to you, because there are going to be a lot of things that you're not going to have access to, because you get kind of Metroidvania-esque abilities throughout the course of the story that will allow you to have access and unlock new things. So if like you're going to go for 100% completion and try and collect everything, it's really probably best to just wait until the end to do all that stuff and really just kind of plow through the story. That I feel like I put probably 20 hours into the game, and it didn't need to be nearly that much, but I went through and basically like each kind of day, as each day ended within the game, because that's kind of how they frame it, is, you know, you have a day section and then you have a night section where South Park goes crazy. Anyway, at each of these sections I kind of would like do all the side quests that were available to me and try and go and find as much as I could. And so I would end up repeating myself, and I didn't know what was where and where I'd already been, and so I end up kind of searching through a lot of different places that I didn't need to do if I just kind of waited until later in the game to really do a lot of that exploration and discovery. Just like the first game, there are a ton of Easter eggs and hidden little things, if you're a fan of the show, little references and callbacks all through the ages of South Park. One of my favorites is that there are like references to stuff that happened like back in the first season or two, years and years ago, back when I was in middle school watching South Park when I wasn't supposed to. And so it's definitely a, much like Stick of Truth, there is like a sense of this being a love letter to fans of the series. Kind of lots of love and attention paid to just even the smallest little things that you collect that end up just kind of turning into crafting scrap. If you really pay attention to the names and the descriptions of those items, there's a ton, even little subtle jokes in there. All in all, I had a ton of fun with South Park: The Fractured But Whole. I went through, got the platinum on it, so I've gone through and kind of collected everything and beat the game. I will say the difficulty of the game, even playing it on the like master difficulty, isn't too terribly tough. The combat is pretty simplistic and kind of becomes repetitive. You end up kind of using a lot of the same strategies, especially for like the different enemy types. They do mix up enemy types, and so you know, if you're going up against ninjas, you might have to employ a different strategy from them as you would homeless people or sixth graders or something like that. And then really late in the game, a little too late, I think, to really take full advantage of how interesting this kind of stuff is. They do even start mixing and matching enemy types, so you might, you know, face off against policemen and crab people in the same match, as opposed to throughout the rest of the game where you're really facing like one type of enemy. A lot of fun. It definitely does take steps in improvement from the original game, but I think it also kind of loses. The first game really did have a lot of time, for better or worse, and I think one of the things for better was that the first game, its development cycle really kind of fleshed out the story, whereas this feels like maybe a lot more kind of throwaway gags or ideas that they decided weren't going to make a full episode, so they turn it into a side quest kind of thing here. So, you know, it's a hit or miss. It definitely, I'm glad we got it so soon after Stick of Truth, but it doesn't quite feel like it is as much of a finished product as the first game. Like, both still feel like seasons of South Park, but this one feels maybe like a season that got a little bit abbreviated by a writer's strike or something like that. So those are some of my thoughts on South Park: The Fractured But Whole. Let me know what you think about the game in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. And until next time, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.